asking the question, what if you could manipulate the weather?
Cooperative effort between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
Now that sounds absurd, right? Like crazy conspiracy stuff. I mean, no one can manipulate the weather, right? Or can we?
For the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather.
Well, here's a couple things to consider. It's very interesting that the United States government has been working with chemtrails, cloud seeding, and various forms of weather manipulation since the 1950s. And it hasn't stopped. I mean, why would it?
It's linked to a strange phenomena occurring in our skies.
On clear days, you can often see long white lines being traced high in the sky. They are contrails of jet aircraft, actually long, slender clouds. Weathermen are finding them especially fascinating because a theory is being developed that those long white lines may be changing our weather for the better. Details from Roger O'Neill.
The exhaust from jet engines, usually seen as long, thin trails of white clouds behind high-flying jet airplanes, may be a big reason why there are 30 fewer days of sunshine a year in the Midwest now than there were in 1900. The daily range between high and low temperatures has also narrowed.
In the absence of natural clouds, given the correct atmospheric conditions, jet aircraft in high frequency can almost completely cover the atmosphere with clouds.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning.
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, bringing down rain and even lightning.
If there's methods to manipulate the weather, we can redirect hurricanes, manage droughts, and even stop hunger. We can save people, right?
Using Schaefer-Langmuir techniques, the Army Signal Corps and Office of Naval Research began conducting many of these experiments.
In 1947, Project Cirrus expanded to test cloud seeding on a hurricane traveling eastbound 350 miles off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. They dropped 80 pounds of dry ice into the raging storm, only to realize that the hurricane suddenly changed direction and began traveling back towards the United States. Savannah, Georgia, was hit by record-breaking winds of up to 85 miles per hour. More than 1,500 people were left homeless, and at least 2 people died. Total damage was reported in the millions of dollars, and the project and its participants were blamed for what happened.
Again, man looks to his own efforts to increase the flow of water. Since the 1946 experiments of Dr. Vincent Schaefer, we have known that some clouds can be modified through seeding to yield additional precipitation. In 1961, Congress directed the Bureau of Reclamation to begin a long-range study of cloud seeding with the aim of eventually augmenting the nation's supply of water. The program, called Project Skywater, continues at many sites throughout the United States.
What exactly would we do if we could manipulate the weather? What should we do? Well, if you think about it and follow it through to its conclusion, based off the history of human nature and what is the typical result whenever great forms of power become available to fallible human beings, eventually it will be used for evil. More power, more control.
To control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Evil. But why, Mark? Why would anyone want to do that, say the sheep? Well, first of all, you would have to understand the nature of evil. And if you don't, I feel sorry for you. And that's a whole nother topic for another podcast. I mean, let's think about it. If you could control the weather, you could use it against your enemies, right?
Well, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. They precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam. The bad news is, if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
A wild accusation from Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He says Western countries are causing drought in certain parts of the world, including Iran. He says they're using high-tech equipment to drain raindrops from clouds. He basically says European countries are stealing rain from Iran for their own use.
In 1962, during the Vietnam War, American forces responded with Operation Ranch Hand. Over the next 9 years, spraying an area about the size of Massachusetts with defoliants, the most notorious being Agent Orange. Large swaths of Vietnam were left barren.
Enough food to feed 600,000 people for a year has been destroyed.
Despite this sudden devastation, U.S. officials said the spraying created no lasting harm.
Milton Ross, a Special Forces advisor near Pleiku, has a son born without the tips of his fingers.
North Vietnam charged today that defoliants have produced many instances of miscarriages, congenital defects, and monstrosities among children.
The Vietnamese government insisted the cause was Agent Orange.
Although that war was long ago, there is lingering anger about the United States' use of a controversial defoliant spread by American aircraft on the jungles there.
An epidemic of birth defects, brain damage, and rare cancers still affecting hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese today.
I mean, what a perfect weapon of warfare. And not just the weather, by the way, earthquakes. Oh, yeah, buddy. That technology exists too.
And Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez has once again accused the United States of playing God. This time it's Haiti's disastrous earthquake that he thinks the U.S. was behind. Spanish newspaper ABC quotes Chavez as saying that the U.S. Navy launched a weapon capable of inducing a powerful earthquake off the shore of Haiti. He adds that this time it was only a drill, and the final target is destroying and taking over Iran.
I probably should have named this segment Cognitive Dissonance. I imagine some of your heads are exploding. At the very least, your eyes are rolling. But hear me out. Look, it's already known that there are various ways to cause tremors and earthquakes, from fracking to nuclear weapons set off underground, and a variety of various forms of, shall we say, poking and prodding the Earth's crust, to offshore drilling, subsonic impulses. Well, I'm not sure about that last one. I kind of made that up. But I bet if you research it, I'm not far off.
Today we have Eric Hecker, who is a firefighter contractor for Raytheon, which is a military-industrial complex company. And he was in Antarctica at a Raytheon facility and says that Raytheon has the technology to produce earthquakes all throughout the planet. Remember, all of these gentlemen have testified in front of Congress under oath.
What are you blowing the whistle on?
That there are technologies at the South Pole Station that people can't even consider that exist on this planet. Directed energy weapon systems is something that people need to get into their vocabulary fast. There are embedded in the ice what are called digital optical modules, DOMs. They're about the size of a basketball. The array embedded in the ice is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. It is the world's largest telescope. And now, because we have proven that it can transmit, it's the world's largest directed energy weapons system. It is responsible for the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011 on the front end of the year.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, how did it even come to your attention that this triggered an earthquake? If you're at the South Pole and New Zealand had an earthquake, I mean, how did you know it came from the South Pole?
Without divulging names, I could only say that it was communicated to me from team members that were present and fully read in at the time that they were aware. And since that time,
at the immediate, like the same day?
Oh, absolutely. It was understood.
Well, what was said?
That we accidentally hit Christchurch, New Zealand twice when they were trying to fire up this weapon for the first time.
How about, could we use it, say, against our political enemies? Or is that just more crazy talk? Am I the only one that finds it strange that although it is hurricane season, that right smack dab in the middle of probably the most important election of our lifetime in less than a month, one that is going to potentially change the entire moral direction and political landscape, are two unprecedented major hurricanes that are going to hit smack dab in the heart of one of the biggest conservative swing state areas in Florida and the Carolinas, causing mass levels of disruption and hindering the ability to vote. Nah. Come on, Mark. That's just crazy talk. I mean, there's no evidence. None at all. Not even the slightest bit of research or government programs involving any kind of weather manipulation. Come on.
This U.S. Air Force report graphically outlines the military's desire to exploit and manipulate the weather for the purposes of war by the year 2025. According to one of the most harrowing lines in this report, quote, "Weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments."
Well, the question you should be asking is, in what stage of development are they in? And on what level can it be used? So can we dismiss the idea of weather manipulation as a thing, as though it's not possible? Because again, it certainly appears that it is. And then the next question is, can it or is it being used by a certain conglomerate against another conglomerate with an opposing political ideology to suppress or disrupt said conglomerate from being able to exercise their duty and right to vote? But is it plausible? Maybe. Seems like it to me. Though I'm no weather scientist or climate expert, in light of the evidence, it certainly seems possible.
This geoengineering idea in its simplest form is basically the following. You could put fine particles, say sulfuric acid particles, sulfates, into the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, where they'd reflect away sunlight and cool the planet. There's lots of mystery in the details, and there's some bad side effects, like it partially destroys the ozone layer, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it clearly cools down. And one other thing, it's fast. I guess the thing I haven't said about this is it is absurdly cheap. It's amazing how we can affect the planet. How we can affect the planet.
Oh, and by the way, if things get bad enough and devolve into chaos, the president can declare martial law and postpone the election. Weird. I'm not here trying to tell you what to think. I'm just trying to tell you to think. As hard as that might be for some who just want to be left alone to live a nice, peaceful life without any of this insanity, I get it. But unfortunately, you don't have that luxury anymore. It is crucial and necessary as a fellow American and a functioning member of this great nation we call America to wake up before all is lost. Though we're not perfect, I believe it is still the greatest nation in the world, and there's no other place I'd rather be, and that's worth fighting for. So what I'm asking you to do is check out the link below and see for yourself. If you consider yourself a truth seeker and a critical thinker, then do yourself and the rest of us a favor and take the time to carve out just a little over an hour for one day and watch this documentary and see for yourself if what I'm saying has any validity. After all I'm doing is asking the question.